Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Today I'm in London and have come to talk to an activist and award-winning filmmaker who has been exposing institutional child abuse in a no-nonsense, hard-hitting fashion for the last 5 years. He and his siblings were all victims of abuse. This problem has gained some mainstream coverage in recent months with regards to the Jimmy Savile scandal, and here to talk about this and the whole issue is Bill Maloney. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, Rich. Good to be here.
All right then. Bill, I've just sat and watched your most recent film. I first met you in May 2012, where you came to see a talk that I was given in Walton-on-Thames.
Yeah.
And I've become aware of your films, so I was very interested to do an interview. Now, before we start talking about the films, and then finally we're going to talk about the crux of the matter itself and institutional child abuse, because obviously a very disturbing subject. But I think it's important for people to know your life story first. That's really where I want to start with this. So just tell us where you were born, Bill, how many brothers and sisters you had, and what happened throughout your early childhood.
Well, a short synopsis of my life. My parents were both Irish. They came over here in the early 50s, and they were both abused in the institutions in Ireland, whether they were sort of children's homes or whether they were young offenders, whatever. And my mum, she obviously from that had a few mental issues, and she started having us kids. And my dad was working in the tunnels, when I say the tunnels, in this country, the Victoria line, the tubes. And he was a foreman or a gangerman, as they used to call him, And he was in charge of those guys, but he used to start very early in the morning. So he'd be starting at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He used to go over to Highbury, and he took me there a couple of times. And when my mum was left to her own devices, and she started drinking, and she was using Purple Hearts, which was the drug of the day, and the social services started taking their children away, so we all wound up in care from babies.
Right. So how old were you when you were first taken into care then, Bill?
When I was first taken into care, I was 4 years of age. And that was but I had been in sort of children's homes that I don't remember,
Right, so how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I've got 7 siblings.
7.
And we were all taken into care. So if I can just give you, some of my siblings were in care a lot longer than me. But by the time I was 20, I'd served 14 years in different institutions in this country. And the first institution that I can remember was one called Mill Hill. And it was an orphanage, a Catholic orphanage run by nuns, and that was over in North London.
So out of the 8 brothers and sisters, how many are still alive today?
Well, my sister Diana's dead, my brother Peter's dead, my mum's dead, and it was only about a year ago I found out my mum took her own life in a mental institution. Now that was never disclosed to me. It was only because what they practiced with my family, the social services, was family alienation. So I've got one brother, my brother James, who went to a boarding school in Guildford and was abused there, very opulent area. He talks like Prince Charles, awfully. He says, "Oh, hello, Bill, how are you?
Right.
Haven't seen you for 35 years." So he speaks like that. And then my other siblings I've got 2 others that talk with middle-class accents, and then there's myself and my brother Anthony, Tony. We speak
Cockney.
Yeah. That's what they call me, the Cockney speaking Irishman in the film industry, Right. So it was very tough. We was in and out of care. My mother left. My mother used to come back and abuse my dad. She used to beat him because he was only a small man, even though he was a champion boxer. He was featherweight champion of Southern Ireland, But he would only sort of restrain her or protect himself, So it was, when I was at home, it was very violent. And then when I was taken into care, it was even more violent.
Right, okay. So, and the 2 siblings that have died, that is linked to abuse of some kind. Just tell us.
Yeah, well, my brother Peter, firstly, he was 3 years younger than me. I'm 57 now. And so he was 4 years younger than me, sorry. and he was in and out of different institutions. And then the Pilkington people, you know, the Pilkington glass people.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, well, the biggest glass company in this country. And one of them, a Lord Pilkington, he used to take on young kids, but he was interested in art. So he would take on young kids from the lower working class areas, and it was very, very poor then, you know. And he would take them under his wing and help them with their art, etc. But my brother Peter, even in those days, at the age of 17, was addicted to heroin.
Okay.
So he told me that some very rich, opulent people used to look after him. So that was my brother Peter, and he was found dead in a squat in Tunbridge Wells.
Right.
Opulent area again, and in those days with the transport would have taken a long time to get there, you know. So you know, now with hindsight, I've started investigating the case. Is why was my brother found in a squat? A boy from Brixton and Peckham, really sort of poverty-stricken areas of the day. Why was he taken there?
Right.
And he went up on heroin anyway. So they said he killed himself, and that came out as suicide. And then my sister Diana, this is the real mysterious one, is after I released the film Sun, Sea and Satan to the national networks, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, etc. After that was released, 2 weeks after that, she was found dead in her apartment, and it's very suspicious. And if you go on to Pie Mash Films, you can see the full timeline of what happened to my sister. So my sister died under very suspicious circumstances. Cause of death unascertained 3 years later.
Right. Okay.
And on the day of her inquest, I received an email from the Jersey police asking for a copy of the film Sun, Sea and Satan, and I refused them. So that was on the day of my sister's inquest. On the same day as the inquest, a piece came out in the Irish World about Sun, Sea and Satan.
Right.
And you know, what the film was about, and my involvement in it, and what had happened to my sister. So no investigation. And my sister, when she was found dead in her apartment, even though her body had decomposed, it was never made a crime scene. Now, if a body's found decomposed, then that must be always, by the law, it must be made a crime scene and investigated. Never was.
Right.
It never was.
So do you think there's some, your own gut feeling, do you think there's some connection of her death with that film then?
Yeah, I do, absolutely.
Was she involved in the film at all? Or
No, she wasn't involved in the film, but she did finance the film.
Right.
And she was going to come over to Jersey, and I had a phone call from her when I was in Jersey, and she was crying. She said, I can't do it, Bill, I can't come over there. Because she was taken to Jersey from Lambeth, a children's home in Lambeth, on bogus sailing trips. And strangely enough, the first disclosures of child abuse on the island of Jersey came from the Sea Cadets.
Right.
So she wouldn't come over there, you know. She said, I can't come over there, Billy, you know, I don't want to. And now recently we found a picture of Jimmy Savile, and there's a pyramid of children.
Yeah.
And he's sitting at the bottom. The young girl, blonde girl at the top of that pyramid, that is my sister Diana.
Right. Is that at Haute de la Garenne?
Haute de la Garenne,
Right, okay.
yeah, on the island of Jersey. So
Right.
my sister was there.
Right. Okay. Now, just run through your films in order, Bill. What was the first film that you made?
The first film, first of all, I started in the short film industry, and I made short films, you know, and all my short films were sort of like between 15 minutes and half an hour, and they were always they had social implications behind them, so it was social politics that I was interested in. Then,
but not specifically child abuse, though.
No, I hadn't come forward about my child abuse or my siblings to anyone, even to my wife. You know, I've been married to the same woman for 37 years, and it was only when I started 5 years ago, I left the film industry because I was asked to be involved in the Football Factory and other Brit flicks, and a script I'd written myself, which was a social drama by a film company called Vertigo Films. And but I left them because the film industry is very dirty, and it's dirty in more ways than one. And as it's coming out now, you know, we've got a lot of entertainers, because I see the BBC, I see TV as the film industry. I don't just, you know, the day 35, it's got to be 35mm or 75.
So before you got in making the child abuse exposure films.
I was a filmmaker,
Right,
dramatic filmmaker.
Right, and how long were you involved in that for?
Probably about 4 years I was involved
Right.
in making dramatic
Okay,
films.
so, but what about before that then? Because
Well, before that, I was a hod carrier for 20 years. So I carried bricks on my shoulder for 20 years. I carried
on a building site.
On a building site, I worked hard. You know, I carried bricks on my shoulder, and now I'm carrying the kids on my shoulder. You know, if you like. But after that, I started up my own decorating company, and I was doing well. You know, but it was only when I reached about 40. I started to think about what had happened to me, because you know, I started thinking, like, I want to get in touch with my brothers and sisters, and I don't know where they live. I don't, because they had split us all up. I didn't know where anyone lived.
So just spell that out, Bill. You're saying you were sexually abused as a child then?
I don't know.
Do you want to talk about that or not?
Well, yeah, I'll talk about it. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't know. Now, when I was I was in an experimental boarding school, and it was called Beechcroft in Tooting Bec. And when I went there, I was 12. And I used to have a reoccurring dream. It was like I was asleep, but my arse, my anus, I was in pain.
Right.
And sometimes in the morning, that pain, I could still feel that pain. But it was like there was dreams and I couldn't wake up. Now, the majority of my abuse, I took a lot of beatings, especially in the children's homes, up until I was about 12, until I went to Beechcroft. By sort of female carers, nuns, whatever. The females were very, very spiteful. And then once I started hitting Beechcroft and institutions like Beechcroft, and then young offenders institutions, then a lot of my abuse was again beatings in the institutions, and also I was often put into some kind of solitary confinement, and I was put into solitary confinement as a child as well. You know, so whether that was in a cupboard under the stairs in a children's home, or whether it was in a young offenders institution in a cell. So that was my abuse. But you know, drugs were used, and there's a book. It's called Pin Down, and it's written by, you all might like to see it. It's written by a lady called Cooper, and. In that, she's talking about drugs being used on children in children's homes, and that's what triggered it for me. So you know,
so you put two and two together, and you thought that maybe you were drugged and then abused when you were unaware of it.
Yeah, because some mornings I'd wake up and I was just so drowsy, and there was problems like that with a lot of kids. But in that the experimental boarding school in Tooting Bec, there was a prolific paedophile. He was to become a prolific paedophile, and even in the newspapers they were calling him public enemy number one. His name was Leslie Bailey. He was a black guy, and Leslie Bailey, he wound up, the main thing that he was arrested for, though there were many terrible things that he'd done to children. There was him and 3 other guys in a caravan, and they raped and attacked, raped and killed, I believe it was a 9-year-old kid, tortured him. So this boarding school that I went to, it was experimental, but we were told we were maladjusted, which were kids from dysfunctional homes, but we had to, were supposedly, we all had high intelligence of some sort.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right then, Bill. Well, we're going to go for the first break, and after the break we're going to discuss some of Bill's films in more detail. Welcome back. I'm talking to Bill Maloney about institutional child abuse. Now then, Bill, let's run through your films. What was the first film that you made that was covering this particular issue?
Well, the first film I made, I went to, I made a film, actually. It was a drama, and it was called Lunatic. And Lunatic was about a guy whose life was, you know, revolved around the full moon, the moon cycle, because the moon is a very powerful, you know, entity, if you like. And when you think about it, the moon is it's responsible for our highest tides. When there's a full moon, that's when you get your highest tides. Okay, so our bodies are sort of 84% water. So I always believed that it affected us, you know, and you find that a woman's premenstrual cycle is exactly the same as the full moon, every 28 days, you know. So I made this film, and this guy, it was like a gangster film, but it was a gangster without a gun. And there was a lot of social issues involved in it. So this film was chosen to be entered for the New York Independent Film and Video Festival,
Right.
and that was in Greenwich Village. So I went out to represent that film, and
How long was the film?
the film, it was 90 minutes, but it was a drama.
A full length.
Oh yeah, it was a full-length feature. That was the first feature I made after, you know, most film directors, they start off in the short film industry and then they build up. So that was my first piece of work. And
so what sort of budget did that have then, Bill? Was it like a low budget film?
yeah, that was very like micro budget, you know,
Right,
because
okay.
I walked away from Vertigo Films and told them really to shove it all, you know. And because I wanted to do my own work, because I didn't trust their editing, and it was too controlling, too manipulative. Because
Right.
with a film director, what people have to understand is, if you're a film director, everybody who works on that project, and there can be hundreds if you look at some of the big epics, but of all those people that are involved in the film, their duty is to make sure that the director gets his vision up on that screen. That doesn't happen. That does not happen very rarely unless you're Spielberg, right? So you're controlled by production, by people that are putting the budget in, the investors.
Producers.
The producers and whatever, you know.
Yeah. So did that have any child abuse theme in it then, Bill?
No, it didn't. Like I say, I really hadn't come forward, you know, as an abuse victim, and the people in the film industry, they weren't aware of what was over my shoulder with my siblings, etc. But when I left them, and so I made this, I went and got £30,000 because the film budget I walked away from was £1.2 million.
Right.
Okay, you know, my mates say to me, they say that took a lot of doing, Bill, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because I would have been of a millionaire status now, but it was a dirty business, and what's coming out now, it is, because like, the entertainment world is being shredded at the moment, you know. Okay. But when I went out to New York, I took a small camera with me, you know, and a small digital camera, and I started going onto the streets. So I went into Harlem, and everybody said to me, don't go into Harlem, Bill, you know what I mean? I said, shut up, I come from Brixton, Peckham and Lewisham, you know what I mean? We've got guns on the street there as well. And it's so I went there and I started shooting some documentary. I was at the poor people, you know, the Hispanics and that, and whoever was poor. And I saw some horrific things out there. And then when I came back to London, I'd done the same comparison on the streets of London. When we was in New York, the majority of people on the street, almost all of them, apart from two, I think, they were black people. In London, it was white people, and we only found one black person in London living on the street. So
only one?
Only one. That's all we saw was one person, one black person on the street. You know, but whatever that is, you know.
So,
who knows?
but that still wasn't covering child abuse?
No, I still wasn't covering child abuse. But then when I came back to London and I started talking to the people, they started talking about child abuse. They started talking about child abuse to me. That a lot of these people that are living on the street were abuse victims, whether they're alcoholics, whether they're drug addicts, whatever. They were abuse victims, and then it went bing. And when I looked at the film Billy and Lily, because I had to spoof that because we're saying outrageous things in it, you know, I'm really having a go at the Queen, the monarch, establishment.
Right, so just step back, Bill. The first film was called what? Give me the name of that. The 90-minute one that you filmed in New York.
That was called Lunatic.
Lunatic.
Yeah, but I'd also made another piece of drama after that before.
And that was that called?
And that was called The Blunderers. That was about a 50-year-old black recovering crack cocaine addict and a 50-year-old white recovering alcoholic. Right. So I directed the film, wrote the film, and I also played the recovering alcoholic, which is what I was at the time. I was a recovering alcoholic. I hadn't had a drink for 17 years. But when we won the award in America, and I shot the documentary footage, and some black people, when I went down to Harlem, I showed them it on the camera, and they started crying about. They were just looking at it off the LCD screen, off the camera, the raw footage, the rushes as we call them, and they started crying. And they started saying to me, be careful, and you know, but it was making that and then coming back, doing a comparison in London for the people living on the street. And by the way, when we was in New York, we did win for Lunatic Best International Feature. Right. But the distribution companies all started going bust. Right. So there was no money in it. Right. So when I started looking at the footage of Billy and Lily go to New York, I thought, I like this documentary filmmaking. Right. You don't need great big budgets to do it. Right. And you take complete control, and then you become an investigative filmmaker rather than just a filmmaker, you know. And then I acquired a press pass, and I couldn't believe they gave me one actually.